person, irregardless of anything else around her. In Web3, I think that you have brought more major brands to this asset class than anyone else. You are the president of Vayner3, which is the newly launched or renamed, I should say. You've been around for a while. Vayner kind of, consulting implementation arm. But can I get just a quick elevator pitch out of you, just so everyone's on the same page of exactly what your purview is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Jay, and thank you, yWhales, for tuning in. I'm Avery Akkineni, and I have the great honor of leading Vayner3. Vayner3 is a Web3 consulting firm under the Vayner3 umbrella. We dove right into the rabbit hole of NFTs in early 2021, and since then have helped over a dozen major Fortune 500 companies figure out what the heck is going on in all things Web3. So everything from helping our partners be able to take crypto for the first time, launch their first NFT communities, get their discords off the ground, and start to think how blockchain is really going to impact their industries. That's all in a day's work for Vayner. We are headquartered in New York, Miami, and Chicago, and soon starting to spread our wings around the world as this industry really starts to get its feet under it.
You really have to have, like, it's really true. You have to have boots on the ground in these time zones because, crypto never sleeps. We hear it all the time, and it's kind of ongoing. You have a very interesting background, and I think that's always one of the things that people should understand is no one just kind of shows up here and in Web3 and is ultra successful, without any kind of past experience. And you have, big data. Like, you understand, the marketing flows from big data. You come from, you spend a little bit of time with Google and a variety of other the big tech names that people understand. What was kind of your biggest, things that you brought from that, I hate to, they're tech, they're startups,
Yeah.
they're bleeding edge, but they're established at this point compared to Web3, which is truly, truly bleeding edge, meaning we're changing the rules of the game every few weeks here. What was the biggest kind of learnings that you brought with you from an established tech company to startup land like this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned I worked at Google and I worked there for 7 years. But when I joined Google in 2012, had already been a publicly traded company for several years. So it was a lot more established than what we're doing in the world of Web3. And I think there are a couple of things that I was able to take from my previous experience. But the most important was really the understanding of how a mature operation is organized. I think operations are actually one of the most challenging things for entrepreneurs and for startups is really understanding how to structure your team and how to go not just from 0 to 1, but 1 to 100. And I think on seeing how, Google did things like performance reviews and employee feedback and thinking through perks and all of that really helped me understand how a big company operates and then modify that at a much smaller scale. So actually, when I joined Vayner, I brought a lot of the best practices I learned from the people operations team and the operations team just in general, and we were able to create some efficiencies right off the bat. And that's something that I use all the time. I still sort of use the framework for how Google gives feedback and talks about performance reviews because I think it's so important. And in a very small company and startup, you don't have the luxury to invest in those things the same way that a very big company does. To the level of researching and studying thousands of people and also looking at a much, much, much larger sample size. So that's honestly the most important thing. And I think secondary to that, understanding how Web 2 works very deeply is helpful for understanding the strengths of that and also the pitfalls. I think what we've seen over the last 2 decades is just a tremendous amount of access to information, which I think has been powered by companies like Google and Meta, but they've also accrued the outsized economic benefit of that. And there's a reason they're called a duopoly. So understanding both what those companies unlocked and then also some of the shortcomings in how how the Web 2 economy was really built, I think has been very helpful for understanding where there's an opportunity to do things a little bit differently this go around in this next iteration of the internet, which is Web 3.
Yeah, and I love that answer and that explanation because, irregardless of where people thinking, oh, Web3 is so different, we're such a different asset class, there's still business basics that you have to have,
Absolutely.
and there's still a lot of ingrained culture and everything else that really needs to be thought through from a variety of perspectives to make sure that a startup, irregardless of what asset class, whether it's ag tech, fintech, or blockchain tech, really you kind of have to be able to build your culture, you have to be able to grow your brand and protect your brand from a variety of kind of assets. when you're kind of thinking about Web3 and the brand that you guys have built, and very quickly too. I mean, it's one of those things where it took Google a decade to get to where they to where you kind of showed up in 2012. But now Vayner3, I mean, in 3 years you guys are like, I talk to a dozen people a day, and they're like, well, I can just call over to Vayner3, but they're too busy. You guys have expanded and grown so fast, and I think there's one of the biggest challenges that I'm curious about from your perspective is, where's all the other people that are normally doing all the Web2 stuff? Have they don't get Web2 and Web3 are so different.
Mhm.
Do you kind of find yourselves standing on an island, a little bit with not as much competition as most people would think you have today?
Yeah, well, I think broadly, one really important reason that we've been able to scale is being part of the Vayner3 family. So Vayner3, Vayner3 launched in 2010. Gary and his brother AJ launched this advertising agency, and they've really done the hard work of establishing Vayner as a household name with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, which allow those doors to be very quickly opened. So I think that's part one. And as part of Vayner3, we have almost 2,000 employees all across the globe.
Oh
So we
wow.
have some scale and learnings that can really help things move more quickly. So while we might be an island in Web3, I like to think we're on an archipelago, if you will, of other islands that are also doing cool things, and we're all very close to each other. So we have, a lot of perks and sort of access that we can offer each other from the sort of mothership, which is Vayner Media. The advertising agency is really the core business within Vayner. We have VFriends, which is Gary's NFT project. They just raised $50 million led by Andreessen Horowitz, which is pretty amazing. And we collaborate with them really closely all the time. We've got Vayner Speakers, where we have a number of Web3 speakers. We have Vayner Sports with a number of athletes, and that's AJ's company, and he's got an NFT project as well. So while we're an island, we're really part of this little group together, and we can help each other while sort of maintaining our independence as sort of individual businesses. And I think that allows us to scale really quickly. And of course, I would be completely remiss if I discounted the tremendous value that Gary is able to drive with himself as an influencer and thought leader, and also as a creator. So a lot of the things that we roll out to our clients at Vayner3, we really start testing with Gary. Every platform that we test, we use Gary first as much as we can. So we really get hands-on with it, and we're like, okay, great, this is what works, this is what doesn't. And having that use case in-house is just this tremendous advantage. But to the flip side, and I know you have many entrepreneurs listening to this, I think there's a huge opportunity for services-based companies to jump in here. You're right that there's not that much competition for Web3 consulting firms at the moment because it's so new. But what I see is a very clear trend is every brand wants to know what's going on in this space, and there are a million companies building technology for it. But there's a big gap between brands who know how to, make soda or beer or shoes, and these tech companies who might understand how to develop an interesting blockchain based application. But the idea of like how those two things come together is actually critical. So that's creative and that's strategy. And the tech companies aren't great at providing that, and the brands really need that help. So I think there's actually a really interesting opportunity for people to create specialized agencies, the same way people created specialized search and social agencies, e-com agencies, which now are part of these larger holding companies. But I think that's a pretty clear opportunity because we see the very big boys playing in the space, the Accentures and Deloittes and McKinseys and Bains. And we see the ad agencies, but they don't really understand the technology side. They're also trying to get in the Publicis groups and the Media Monks and all of these folks. And then then on our own little island, I think I like to think about it as a category of our own. We have Vayner, which kind of sits between all of them. But I think there's a huge opportunity there for entrepreneurs to think about launching agencies or think about launching sort of as channel partners. When I worked at Google, there were so many agencies that their entire business was based on Google. They knew it's same exact sort of challenge. Google had created this incredibly powerful technology with Google AdWords, and which is basically the search platform. And then brands wanted to use it, but again, they needed someone in the middle to know how to design campaigns and how to do ad group optimization and how to adjust bids. So there were these companies that sort of sprung up and were really able to be channel partners for Google and specialize in that service. Same thing happened with Facebook. When you look at, the social codes and the decodeds, they created a business just on really understanding Facebook ads because Facebook wants to go sell the technology to the brands, and the brands want to do it, but they need that creative thinking, and they need the both media and sort of creative side to actually be in the middle and make it effective. It's like if I went to go play a piano, like I wouldn't be good at it. It's not because the piano is bad; it's because my skills are bad, right? Same piano, you have John Legend go and it sounds amazing, right? It's all in that sort of services layer. So I do think there's an interesting business opportunity here for folks who are into this space to be that bridge between brands and these technology platforms who are springing up constantly with the desire to sort of serve brands in Web3 and particularly the NFT space.
Yeah, no, and I love that explanation of the thought. And when we talk about decentralized, internet and decentralized Web3, one of the things I want to say, and Vayner especially, is you guys are so welcoming of anyone. Like, it really harks back to the early days of Web 1, much more than Web 2, where everyone's just going, how do we figure this out? We need to make this a thing. And it's better for all of us to work together and make sure we're driving in the right direction versus what you have in traditional tech companies today, which is, dark siloed, stealth projects that nobody knows about until the very end, and then the code is hidden and everything else. I get reached out to constantly, by people saying, "Hey, we love what you're doing. How can we help?" And vice versa. That's exactly what we're doing. Vayner doesn't need our help, but we love just exposing what you guys are doing to our communities and others, because I think that the way that you look at the entire asset class is we're so early. We're so early, and there's so much meat left on this bone that we haven't even thought of before we get there. How early do you think we are in the cycle towards the first billion users, which I would consider mainstream adoption by that point?
Oh, I think depending on who you ask, we have under 1 million users in this space right now.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's depending on who you ask. It could be 500,000. It could be 7 million. Everybody has data that supports their argument. But I think we are very, very early. We're very much in the first inning of this game. I think we saw just over the past 18 months such a hot hype cycle, which really put, and I'm thankful for that hype cycle in that it brought mainstream eyes to what's happening. And there was enough newsworthiness just because of the prices. They were so headline grabby that it really got a lot of big players interested, both on the talent side and on the brand side. They're like, what's happening here? It made them pay attention. But I think there's also the practicality of it still is incredibly early. And we haven't yet seen, with the exception of NBA Top Shot, anything that's really crossed into appealing to millions of people at once. And in marketing, we talk a lot about this like technology adoption curve, right?
mm-hmm,
I
yep.
think we're still in innovator camp. Some people are like,
I
we're an
agree.
early adopter. To me, I think we're innovators. You've got this really small group of people who are super passionate. They're really super fans. Like they'll grind in the Discord and they'll jump through hoops to get X, Y, Z, and they'll stake and they'll everything. That's not going to be how normal users like operate in the world of Web3. But we have this dedicated community of super fans, and our perspective at Vayner is these super fans actually influence the mainstream adoption. They become the tastemakers that help scale this into the broader ecosystem. And you have this, like everything starts in these small communities, like culture begins in sub-communities and subgroups. And I think that there's enough passion in this subgroup to create mainstream consciousness of that this is happening. Even the fact that, someone like you, Jay, is taking the time to do this podcast means that, hey, there's enough interest here to, that it's worth looking into. But my perspective is we are very, very early, and it will be probably like 5 to 10 years before we're near 1 billion users.
I completely agree. And NBA Top Shots, I think, is a fabulous example of a demo of the technology, but there's no utility. There's no, long-term viability for those people yet. And so it's kind of, and people don't even always understand what they bought. My question to you is, and I think this is kind of an overarching one. You have some of the top brands in any industry. I mean, we're talking, L'Oreal and P&G, Budweiser, Ford, like household, Fortune 50 brands that you guys work with. What's the biggest misconception that you're constantly still dealing with, even today when these brands kind of approach you guys?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's all financial. Right now, because of what we see in mainstream headlines and the sort of blurring between the crypto ecosystem and the NFT ecosystem, which are very interlinked, is that it's like all financial, where we believe that the technology is more fundamental and something that will be underpinning a number of creative, community, brand activations and executions. But I think the biggest misconception is, hey, this is a way to make money. And yes, by the way, it is a way to make money if you do it the right way and you design the right campaign, and you design the right way to engage and reward your community. There absolutely is like financial opportunity and incentive for these early participants, I'll say. But I think the biggest misconception is that this is purely financial. And what you'll see coming out of Vayner in the next couple of months is a lot of programs that are free, are open access, are really meant to be more sort of building that early community without these financial incentives, which I also think does preclude a lot of the more mainstream people from participating. Because if you ask someone in Web3 to spend, zero point 0.1 ETH, they think it's nothing. But you ask like a normal person, they're like, oh, that's $200. Like, that's a lot of money. They were like, I thought that would be $2. I think the scale is a little bit different from those mindsets, just in terms of financial, though that's kind of evened out in the last couple of weeks.
No, I really, again, I think that's a great answer, and I completely agree with you, because one of the things that is that if we're going to be onboarding, a billion people, and that's the goal. I mean, we want to get to mainstream. We're all doing this so we can get there. And right now, the costs are very expensive. There's no devs. I mean, I think that if there's any devs available, you guys have them, and any that are coming up through school, you guys have already got them. So when we talk about getting to mainstream, it's got to get to the point where it's like anyone can create a Facebook account, anyone can create a Twitter account, and from there, the on-chain monetization of people's audience. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that ability to own your identity is truly one of the biggest Web3 things that we're going to see, of course. And you do this every single day. If I can just get you to take a step back and let's pretend we have kind of that billion users on here. We've reached mainstream. It's 5+ years from now. How does that look? And I know this is a very broad question,
Mm-hmm.
but how does a Gen Zer who's just graduated college, how is their life going to be different by just everyday Web3 technologies?
I think that by the time we have a billion users, it will be invisible. They'll simply be operating with their digital wallets, without necessarily understanding all of the technology that goes behind it. I'll use the example of like your Apple Wallet, right? I don't know if you have an iPhone, but anyone who has an iPhone, like, it's just right there. I live in Miami, everyone takes Apple Pay. But that also took several years, right? Like, when their product first came out, people were still preferring to pay with their credit card. Not every POS terminal took Apple Pay. Like, there was this sort of like build that actually got there. I mean, not so long ago, and in parts of the world where some of your listeners are based, like, I just moved back from Singapore recently, and Singapore is super like digital friendly, but that's not the case for all markets. Like, if you even look at somewhere like Japan, it's a very cash heavy market. So this idea of moving to that place so quickly is a really interesting use case. I think that where we'll go with Web3 is that it'll be invisible. It'll just be like, hey, this is my identity. Let's say I'm going to get a shot at the doctor, right? Like, maybe I'm tapping my phone. I personally have access to that, but I can tap it. I can then own the sort of records and have those changed immediately, and I'm in control of that, and then I can make that interoperable with other healthcare systems. I think it will be that just sort of super easy, super like underneath the hood kind of thing, where like, yes, we are going to have some super nerds who know exactly how it works, but I think about myself and understanding Apple Pay. I do not get it. I tap my phone, it makes a little sound, and I know that it rang up, right? And I can see the receipt in my phone. I think it'll be like that, just invisible and ubiquitous.
And I completely agree. Nobody today, when they're going on to any website, is going, "Oh, where's this hosted? Is this on S3 or Azure?
Oh,
What's your TCP/IP connection baud rate?" I mean, like, we're geeks and we're nerding out at this stuff, but that's how early we are. I mean, I remember having sticky notes on the side of my monitor from pre, kind of, you had to type in the IP address of servers. In fact, I even remember when you had to dial into modems to get into different servers. So, I mean, I think we're really along the lines there, because we still don't have the bridges. We definitely do not have the wallets. And I know you guys are working on that quite a bit at Vayner, because security has to be, it can't be something that people are saying, hey, I'm going to go from this traditional system to this extremely volatile and extremely risky system over here. What's kind of the, outside of, wallets and bridges, which is something I always talk about, what's kind of the biggest hurdles that we need to, as an industry and an asset class, focus on to fix?
Yeah, wallets and bridges are two very important ones. Security is another really important one. And then I think that on the more sort of marketing side of things, it's about demand. People need to actually want this stuff. Right now, there are certain projects that are certain like initiatives that are like very clear use case. The vast majority of people simply don't see the value in a digital asset because the Web 2 alternative is still better and more convenient. And
Cheaper.
there hasn't, of course, this is how everything starts. I think back to like even like 10 years ago in ecom, it was like, I'll just go to the mattress store. Why would I order this online? Because I can't try it. It's more convenient to go to the mattress store. Now you just one click, it's at your house in 2 days. That has been, that, experience has been improved. So I would sort of bucket that into like user experience, like the UX needs to improve dramatically, and there needs to be enough reason for people to want one of these things beyond just financial speculation. It's like, hey, I want this because it's an actually better alternative to my like carrying around my vaccine card in my wallet on a piece of paper, right? It needs to be something that actually creates demand, and I think that'll actually be driven brands and sort of entertainment properties have this unique ability to galvanize fandom. And I think that we'll see some of these players really drive some of the early like desire into the world of Web3, whether that's across gaming, across major IP properties that are designing new experiences that are exclusively available, or celebrity sort of fandom. I think those are the places where we could really see like a mainstream draw of desirability.
Yeah, and I mean I really love that because we have to be better as an asset class, and education is one of the biggest things. What's some of the things that Vayner really focuses on how to educate the mainstreams on proper use and adoption of Web3 technologies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Jay. And I think our strategies kind of pivoted over the last 18 months. Where we were like 18 months ago was really around sort of individually hand to hand combat, onboarding people into the sort of true world of Web3. If you look at even like VFriend's YouTube, we're talking like these sessions hosted by May, where she's one on one explaining things to people, explaining them how to get a ledger. It was really like hand to hand combat. And I think that got us a critical mass to sort of get the VFriends project off the ground, because a lot of the people who the VFriends team was onboarding, this was their first NFT, this was their first experience with crypto. They were really doing this as part of their association with Gary's brand and the value that he's delivered to them over the past decade plus. So that was kind of like the hand-to-hand combat stage. Then we sort of scaled that into also hand-to-hand combat with marketers and brand leaders, so they understood it themselves, was individually onboarding people. Of course, we designed a lot of content, which lives on different websites, from VFriends to 1:37 p.m. to Vayner3.com, the 10 steps to get your first NFT, all of these kind of guides, executive's guide to NFTs. We created this type of more scaled content. And where we're sort of pivoting now is actually into things that are more simple, is creating easier paths, because I think we see there's still so much friction. And now having onboarded thousands of people, there's still a lot of friction. And it is heartbreaking to hear when people, help them get their first thing and they click on a bad link in Discord and they're like, okay, this is now gone. And you just feel so awful about it. I think we are now focusing on trying to like experiment with properties that require a little bit less friction as people's first entry point.
Gotcha.
So if you look at, for example, VFriend Series 2, you could buy with a credit card. You look at some of the programs we're doing right now with Bud Light and Dapper Labs, all credit card, custodial wallet. We just did a program that launched last week with Block Bar, same thing, custodial wallet option, credit card option. We are looking now to there was the hand-to-hand combat, the scaled era, and now we're in the simplify era of looking for pathways that just reduce the barrier and also reduce the risk for consumers, because we have seen just so many sort of scam situations.
Yeah, and I think that when we think about self custody, that's not something that our society is used to in any way, shape, or
No.
form. I mean, it's there's always someone else responsible. The majority of our society uses credit cards, and if someone steals our credit card number, we call the number, go, it wasn't me, and it gets reversed, and you move on your way. And we're just not used to the fact that it is permanent. And I deal with the same thing. I deal with these people that got into it, they learned, they took the class, and they're super excited, and they get their few things, and then like weeks or months or whatever it is later, I hear back from them, they're like, think my things are gone. What happened? I go, well, what do you mean it's gone?
Yeah.
And so you go through that, and I love that you guys are working so hard on there. Pivoting over to another question, and Avery, I apologize. You gave me a shorter amount of time, so I'm going to rapid fire all
Yeah,
my questions.
please.
Get you, and you're amazing at this. So we saw kind of the year of the ICOs,
Hmm.
and that was the first bull rush, kind of really pushed on like, oh my god, you can make any coin, and it was a bunch of garbage technology that didn't go anywhere, but it brought people into the asset class that then developed the next phase. In this last bull rush, I don't think it was led by NFTs, but it was certainly NFTs were one of the headlines. You guys are huge in NFTs. You guys are leading the charge in different protocols around how NFTs are used, and I think that I applaud everyone in your staff and your team for pushing on utility behind the NFTs and not just kind of JPEGs for the sake of JPEGs. Where do you think the next where are you guys focusing on, or you think the next bull run when it comes is going to be kind of highlighted around of the new existing technologies that I think we're all playing with right now?
A couple of things. So we actually have a few areas where we think that, like, no one has a crystal ball, and I'll start off by saying that. But we think there are a couple of things could be really interesting in the immediate term. There's a few places that you're going to see us do more. Ticketing being a big one. That's a place where we think there's a very immediate use case. Loyalty, another very immediate use case. Um, Sort of this digital twin idea and sort of digital fashion is another, or digital items, I should say, is another place that we think there's like an immediate opportunity that we can capitalize on. Where I think that the sort of next bull run will come in um, is broader access to crypto, like sort of more mainstream usages of crypto. We see little small things, and some of our clients are also participating and playing in this space. It's still very, very small in the United States. I think that could change, and that could kind of catalyze the next run. Second thing is, I think experiences that are exclusively available, like really desirable experiences, not like some of the things that we've seen over the past year, but things that like are really, really highly desirable, available exclusively through these things. And then the third piece I do think is interoperability.
Yep.
Consumers are going to drive this, right? If consumers are voting with their wallets and voting that this is an important place for them, then everybody else has to follow, from talent and entertainment to brands. Everybody's got to follow where the consumers are going. And I think that creating experiences where the consumers actually get a superior experience to what they're having now is what's going to catalyze that next bull run.
I love that. You brought up before, and one of the things I do appreciate about how you guys, and again, when I say you guys, your entire organization assets operates, is community is a huge thing. You guys, kind of believe it. You push it with the brands that you're representing, and you push it in and of yourselves on communities. What's your feelings on where DAOs are going to be heading? Because it's to me, it's one of the most interesting technologies of how to connect people
Yeah.
around the planet.
So I think DAOs were also a big part of the bull run, and everyone was like, okay, you get governance access to this, and that's amazing. And I actually, had friends and acquaintances who turned their companies into DAOs. I agree that DAOs are a really interesting organizational structure, and some folks have done really interesting work of getting these set up properly. Shout out to Alex Taub and the Upstream team for what they're building to make DAOs more accessible. I do think, though, that with some exceptions, broadly, a lot of DAOs have incredibly low participation. As Americans, we can't even get people to vote for the president. So voting for like these small decisions in a DAO, I think when people are paying a ton of attention because they're making a lot of money during a bull market, they're active. And then what we've seen over the last few months is that's really tapered off. Of course, with a few notable exceptions who've been able to really leverage this technology to build a meaningful brand. Just seeing how many DAOs sort of like were created and nobody's voting. And there are all these, back to the earlier point around organization, how do you fire someone who works at a DAO? There's all these questions that have yet to be answered. And I think that, Vayner is not a DAO. We are a company, an owned company. And I think that is actually important for the next sort of growth of our ecosystem. We haven't yet seen someone who can operate a fully decentralized team as a DAO because it's just very, very early.
I'll take the challenge. we're working
There
very
you go.
we're working very, very hard in this.
Then you're going to be the next one, Jay. But yeah, for us, I would say there are folks like you guys, folks like Now, and so there are companies who are doing really cool stuff in this space. Hasn't been a place that we've personally seen success yet.
Yeah, I agree. That's why we're not a DAO today. We're a traditional company, and we look at DAO technology, but there's a lot of the roadmap that has to be built technology wise before it truly is ready. I mean, putting a bunch of coins on chain and saying go vote, cool, but
Exactly.
we can do better. My next and kind of last one to wrap it up is we're going to see the conversion of traditional Web 2 giants,
Yep.
Web 1, Web 2 giants over to Web 3 technologies. Who's doing it well and who's really, kind of dropping the ball?
First, I'll say that everyone's doing it. How well they're doing it, it's a bit of a question mark. Every single one of the big technology companies is actively investing in this space and looking into it very closely. I think it, one, provides them a potential additional touch point with consumers, a new thing they can do. But secondarily, it can be a very real threat to their business. This is public information, but Snap just laid off 20% of their team like a week or two ago, and that included their entire Web3 team. So they're an example of, they're focusing on their core business, et cetera, et cetera. They're an example who's sort of pulled away from it. At the same time, we see folks like Meta very actively building the space and integrating token gates and NFTs within their sort of core technology. Same with folks like Salesforce, folks like Shopify, very openly building this space. And I think those who are doing it right are taking the are getting the counsel of the sort of early adopters and then thinking about how they can make that more mainstream. I want to give those three organizations a shout out because they've actually intentionally partnered with Web3 leaders like Shopify, for example. We were actually one of, I think, their first token gate use case. But they also worked with the Doodles. They worked with the Atom Bomb Squad and others to sort of show that they're friendly. They had, in fact, at one point, it even changed their profile picture to, I think, an Atom Bomb Squad, which was awesome on Twitter. So I love that they're really like leaning into it while looking at how they can actually bring this as an offering to their consumers. Second one I'll shout out is Salesforce. Salesforce has this Web3 advisory board, of which I will disclose I am a part of it. They, have gotten amazing folks like Keith Grossman from Time and Maria from Sound Ventures and ApeCoin to sort of advise them on how to roll this out with the ambition of bridging the early adopters in Web3 to the mass adoption that's available through some of their partners. And Meta, some of like they brought on some early NFT creators, folks like Maliha from Women Rise, Gary, and many others as well, to sort of celebrate those artists getting their assets available on Meta. So I'll give all those a shout out with the caveat that nobody's had a breakthrough yet. Everybody's been sort of pandering to this very small group, and it has not yet had a breakthrough into mainstream that I've seen.
Fabulous. And it's true. I think just anyone you just need to be thinking about the space. You need to at least have a Web3 roadmap. It's going to change 20 times before you implement it. But that's huge. And so on that same note, and kind of as my final question, what is the, kind of one or two things that anyone that's an entrepreneur in the space or wanting to get into the space really should be thinking about from a philosophical reason, not a technical reason, of how they should approach investing into a project in this space?
Investing in a project, I would really say like business fundamentals matter. Look at proven founders. Don't try to ride the hype cycle. The like FOMO memes are so real. Everything I FOMO'd into like went to zero. So personal experience, like don't just business fundamentals really matter when you're investing in any type of an asset class, right? Including NFTs. So looking at people who've been around for a long time, who have had proven success and track record, that's something to maybe consider versus, hey, what's the next project trending on OpenSea? I think that's probably true for how a lot of like your sort of investing community can think about it. And as entrepreneurs, my real advice would be like, trust your gut and don't follow the trends. The trends come and go. Like the evolution of Web3 happens in these cycles of micro adoption. But if you're just trying to capitalize on one of them, you either need to move so incredibly fast to catch that trend, or you're better off looking for like a real business use case that you see as someone who understands business. I think that's a mistake I see a lot of people doing is they're jumping onto a trend like a month too late and you're like, oh, that's already sort of happened. But you could set the next trend if you got the right idea.
I love that. And you guys are setting all the trends, and we quite simply follow along and see what you guys are doing every single day. And you're extremely active on social media. You're at every conference. I don't know how you manage it, Avery. It's fascinating to watch you. With that, like I said, yWhales. This is Avery from Vayner3. Again, probably the most active entrepreneur in the Web3 asset class. And so again, I would advise you to follow her on LinkedIn, follow her on Twitter. Avery, anywhere else you want people to kind of chase after you?
No, just follow Vayner3 V Friends 1:37 p.m. And of course Gary V. If you want to hear everything that we are cooking. And Jay, thank you so much for your kind words and for having me today. yWhales, it has been a pleasure, and I hope to get the chance to connect with many of you all.
Fabulous. Awesome. Avery, don't go anywhere. We're going to end up recording. yWhales, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks so much.